I couldn't save them. They took everything from me, and I stood by and watched.
There was a time when I thought family meant everything. I believed in the bond that ties us together, the love, the loyalty, the unspoken promises that should last forever. But everything changed in a single moment, when the person I trusted the most, the one I spent my entire life sacrificing for, betrayed me in the worst way possible. My world crumbled before my eyes, and I couldn't comprehend how someone I'd given everything to could turn their back on me so easily. It was a feeling that struck deep, far beyond the betrayal itself. It was the realization that the love I had given had been taken for granted, manipulated and discarded without a second thought. The camera lingers on a family photo, capturing a moment of happiness, a time when things seemed whole. But as the photo fades into darkness, the scene shifts to an empty chair at the dinner table. Where once laughter and conversation filled the air, now silence dominates. A letter, carefully penned by Jacob to his son, lies on the table. Slowly, the camera zooms in, revealing a crack forming down the center of the paper. The crack deepens, symbolizing the broken trust and fractured relationship between them. The weight of the betrayal sinks in, leaving a feeling of emptiness in the room, both physical and emotional. This is not just about money or inheritance. It's about the hurt that cuts deeper than any material loss. It's about realizing that sometimes the person you love most can turn out to be the one who hurts you the most. I spent my life working hard for my family. From the moment I could walk, I understood the value of $1. Born and raised in a small town where every cent mattered, I knew that nothing came easy. My father was a man of few words, but he taught me the importance of hard work through his actions. He didn't give me lessons on ambition or success. Instead, he showed me that life was about grit, perseverance, and sacrifice. And that's the lesson I carried with me. There was no time for shortcuts, no time for excuses, just a steady grind, day after day, year after year. I worked every kind of job, manual labor, construction, anything that would put food on the far table and provide for my family. My hands became calloused over time, their roughness a reflection of the years I spent building a life for those I loved. The years were long, often filled with sleepless nights and aching muscles. But there was always a sense of pride that came with it. No matter how hard the work, I did it with the knowledge that every sacrifice I made was for a future I couldn't quite touch yet, but was determined to build for my son. Every blistered hand, every aching back, was worth it if it meant Ethan could have a life free of the struggles I faced growing up. I remember the early days, the tiny apartment where we lived, the worn-out furniture, the creaky floorboards. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. I would come home tired, sometimes barely able to stand, but I made sure to spend those moments with him, reading him stories or teaching him things I had learned the hard way. I would tell him about my childhood, the sacrifices my parents had made for me, and the hope that one day he would have a life far better than my own. I always tried to instill in him a sense of responsibility, a sense of gratitude for the opportunities I was working so hard to provide. Even as I worked relentlessly, I never asked for anything in return. Not for admiration or recognition, not for praise or acknowledgement, just for one thing, that he would appreciate what I was doing for him. I didn't need a thank you or grand gestures. I just wanted him to understand that everything I did, every moment of hardship, was to ensure he could have a life that was easier than mine. I wanted him to see the value in hard work, the importance of gratitude, and the significance of family. That was my dream. Nothing extravagant, no fancy wealth or fame, just the hope that Ethan would appreciate the life I was striving to give him. Our home wasn't much, but it was ours. Every inch of it carried the marks of the years of effort we had put into making it a place of comfort, even if it was modest. The walls, though faded and cracked in places, told the story of a family that had built something from nothing. There were the worn carpets that we had picked out together, the mismatched furniture that had been collected over the years, and the hand-me-down items that had their own history. Each piece of furniture held memories, Dinners around the kitchen table, laughter echoing through the halls, quiet evenings spent reading together in the living room. To me, this was more than just a house. It was a testament to the sacrifices we had made as a family. But as the years went on, I saw changes in Ethan. He grew older, and with each passing year, the carefree boy I once knew seemed to drift further away. I could see it in his eyes when he started to care less about the little things, the small, everyday moments that used to matter to him. He started to spend more time with friends, more time out of the house. There were nights when I'd come home from work, my body aching, and find that he was gone out at some party or gathering, leaving the house empty and quiet. I never pushed him too hard, figuring it was a phase. But deep down, I knew something was changing, and it worried me. As Ethan grew into a young man, he became more independent, more distant. He no longer seemed to have the same appreciation for the simple things. The idea of hard work, of building something from the ground up, seemed to fade away. He was more focused on enjoying life in the moment, spending money on things he didn't need, pursuing fleeting pleasures, and drifting further from the values I had tried to instill in him. The longer I watched, the more I realized he was beginning to take my sacrifices for granted. The lessons I had tried so hard to teach him seemed to fall on deaf ears. And as a father, that hurt more than anything else. In the beginning, I tried to talk to him about it, hoping to bring him back to the values I held dear. But his responses were dismissive. He didn't see the point. He didn't understand why I was so concerned about money or responsibility when he could enjoy life without the weight of those things. I watched as he spent his time chasing after material things, indulging in luxury, and ignoring the foundation I had worked so hard to give him. My heart sank each time I saw him go down that path, knowing that I had spent my entire life working, saving and sacrificing for him, only for him to turn his back on it all. It was always the same. He would ask for more things, more experiences, more indulgences, without ever truly appreciating what he already had. And I started to wonder if he even realized the sacrifices that had gone into the life we had built together. I worked tirelessly for him to have a future that wasn't clouded by debt or hardship. I never wanted him to face the struggles I had known as a child. But as time went on, I began to wonder if he even understood the price of the life I had given him, the life I had worked so hard to build for him. I didn't want much from him, just a small bit of gratitude for the life I had given him and the sacrifices I had made along the way. I didn't need anything in return but for him to see the value in what I had done for him, to recognize that the future he was living wasn't just handed to him, it was earned through years of hard work, sweat, and sacrifice. I never asked for anything extravagant, just that he would respect the life I had given him and appreciate the foundation I had worked so hard to create. But in the end, it seemed that was too much to ask. And that was the turning point. The moment I realized everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, was slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But what hurt the most wasn't just his actions. It was the fact that I had spent my whole life building a future for him, and it was all too easy for him to take it for granted. In the end, I had given him everything, and all I ever wanted in return was for him to see it. But over the years, Ethan grew up to be someone I didn't recognize. The boy I raised, the boy I hoped would carry my dreams forward, was now a man, driven by his own desires, consumed by a world of materialism and fleeting pleasures. It wasn't just his behavior that changed, it was something deeper, something more profound that I couldn't put my finger on. I watched him slip further away, and each time he made another careless decision, it felt like a small crack in the foundation I had worked so hard to build. I tried to hold on to the hope that he would come back to the values I had tried to instill in him, but with every passing year, that hope grew fainter, and the cracks deepened. At first it was small things, a missed phone call, a forgotten promise, a lack of gratitude for all the sacrifices I made. I brushed it off, chalking it up to typical teenage rebellion, or maybe the growing pains of becoming an adult. But as time went on, the small things turned into bigger issues. I started noticing that his choices became more reckless, more selfish, and more distant from everything I had worked for. His once bright future now seemed clouded by his thirst for material gain and a constant desire for validation. I wanted to believe it was just a phase, that he would snap out of it and return to the responsible young man I had raised, but I began to realize that the boy I had known was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't understand. I'd never been one to pry into Ethan's life too much. I believed in giving him space to grow, to make his own decisions, even if they weren't always the best ones. But there came a day when I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. It was a quiet afternoon when I first discovered what he had done, when everything I had built for him came crashing down in an instant. I had been sorting through some old paperwork, things I had neglected to organize for years, when I found a letter buried under a stack of bills. I didn't recognize the envelope at first. It was an official-looking document, one I hadn't seen before. I pulled it from the pile, the weight of it feeling oddly heavy in my hands. When I opened it, I could barely believe what I was reading. The words jumped off the page in a blur, but they were clear enough. Ethan had sold the property I had worked my entire life to secure for him. The inheritance I had planned to pass down to him was gone, sold off to fund his reckless lifestyle. My heart sank as I sat there staring at the letter, the reality of what I was reading sinking in slowly. I could feel the anger rising in me, but it wasn't the anger of betrayal. It was something deeper, something more painful. It was the betrayal of my trust, the betrayal of everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed. I had given him everything. I had worked my fingers to the bone, sacrificed so much of myself to give him a future that was stable, that was secure. And now it was all gone. He had sold it, not to invest or to help build something greater, but to fuel his own indulgence. The shock of it left me paralyzed for a moment. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know how to process what I was reading. It wasn't just a financial blow. It was an emotional one. It felt like everything I had done, everything I had given meant nothing to him. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. My hands trembled as I held the letter, and the weight of the situation settled over me like a heavy fog. I thought of all the long hours, the missed birthdays, the holidays spent working instead of being with him, and I realized with a cold clarity that Ethan had never truly understood the sacrifices I had made. He had never understood what it took for me to give him the life he had. And now, he had thrown it all away, all for the sake of his own selfish desires. I tried to think of a reason, some justification for why he would do something so reckless, but the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Ethan had always been impulsive, always chasing after the next thrill, the next shiny object. But this, it felt like a line had been crossed. It wasn't just a careless decision, it was a betrayal of everything I had worked for. It was a betrayal of me. The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Ethan. For a moment I considered not answering. What was there left to say? How could I even begin to address what had just happened? But I answered the call, my voice cold, barely above a whisper. He didn't know I had discovered what he had done. He didn't know the weight of his actions had already crushed me. "Hey, Dad." Ethan's voice came through, light and casual. It sounded so normal, so unchanged, that it made the weight of what I was holding in my hands feel even heavier. "I was thinking of going out with some friends tonight. What do you think?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Ethan, we need to talk." There was a pause, a brief silence on the other end of the line. "About what?" he asked, almost as if he didn't already know. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he had hurt me, how his actions had torn apart everything I had built for him, but all I could do was hold back the words as my chest tightened with the pain of betrayal. I had spent my life building a future for him, and in a single moment, he had sold it all away without a second thought. The conversation ended soon after, and I was left alone with my thoughts and the letter that had shattered everything. I couldn't look at him the same way anymore. How could I? How could I ever see him as the boy I had once known? The boy I had spent my life trying to protect, when he had so callously destroyed everything I had worked for? The betrayal wasn't just in the sale of the inheritance. It was in the way he had dismissed everything I had done for him, in the way he had taken for granted the life I had built with my own hands. In that moment, I realized that everything I had given him, every sacrifice I had made, meant nothing to him. And that realization, painful and heartbreaking as it was the beginning of everything that would follow. I couldn't believe it. How could this be real? I kept rereading the letter over and over, thinking somehow I had missed something, but there it was, clear as day. Ethan had sold the inheritance, the property I had worked my entire life to secure for him, to give him something stable, something he could build his future on. It wasn't just about the money, not really. It was never about the money. I had never cared about that. What hurt the most wasn't the loss of the land. It was the loss of something much deeper. It was the loss of trust, the loss of respect. My own son had taken something that was never meant for him to sell, something that symbolized every sacrifice I had made for him, and he had traded it for a fleeting taste of luxury, of indulgence, without a single second thought. I had always hoped that Ethan would understand the weight of what I was doing. I worked countless hours in jobs that drained me, physically and emotionally. I had missed family dinners, important milestones, and holidays, all to provide for him, to ensure that he would never have to struggle the way I had when I was younger. I wanted him to be better than me, to have the chance to chase his own dreams without the weight of financial stress hanging over his head. But instead it felt like my sacrifices had been in vain. Every hour I spent away from him, every moment I had to sacrifice, every dollar I earned with aching hands, now felt pointless. Ethan had taken the foundation I had built and sold it like it was nothing more than a trinket he could exchange for the latest gadget or a night out on the town. It wasn't just a transaction, it was a betrayal of everything I had tried to teach him. The days after discovering the truth were a blur. My mind raced, replaying the events over and over, trying to make sense of what had happened. The shock, the disbelief gave way to a quiet rage, one that simmered beneath the surface and twisted into something much darker. I had spent my life giving him everything, and yet it felt like he never appreciated a single thing. Every time he asked for something more, another gift, another trip, another indulgence, I had always given it, hoping it would teach him something about responsibility, about the value of hard work. I thought he would eventually understand that nothing in life is handed to you, that you have to earn what you want. But now, I realized how wrong I was. Ethan had never understood that lesson, and that realization gnawed at me. He didn't value what I had done for him. He didn't respect the years of labor, the quiet sacrifices I had made behind the scenes. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How could he do this? How could he betray me like this? How could he look me in the eye every day and not say a word about his plans? Ethan knew how much the inheritance meant to me, how important it was for our family's future. It wasn't just a piece of property, it was the fruit of my labor, my blood, my sweat. It was the result of every single sacrifice I had made, of the long hours, the missed birthdays, the sleepless nights. I had worked tirelessly to build a future for him, to secure a life for him that didn't have to worry about the struggles I had faced. And yet, in a single moment, he took it all away, without even the decency to tell me. I couldn't bring myself to confront him immediately. The anger was too raw, too fresh. I wanted to lash out, to scream at him, to make him understand the magnitude of what he had done. But the silence, the growing sense of betrayal in my heart, held me back. It felt like if I confronted him too, soon it would only make things worse. I needed time to process it, to understand what had happened and why. More than that, I needed time to figure out what to do next. How could I fix this? Could it even be fixed? Could I still teach Ethan the lessons I had tried so hard to impart? Or had I lost him forever? It wasn't just the money that hurt. It wasn't just the land, the property, or the inheritance. It was the fact that, in one decision, Ethan had completely disregarded everything I had worked for. He hadn't just sold something, he had sold the respect I had for him, the trust that had existed between us. I had always believed that no matter what, family would stick together, that no matter the differences, we would always have each other's backs. But now, in the wake of his actions, I wasn't so sure anymore. Was this the son I had raised? Was this the boy who had once looked up to me, who had once believed in the things I believed in? The weight of it all pressed down on me every day, making it harder to get up, harder to breathe. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed as a father, that all my hard work, all my sacrifice had been for nothing. And even more painful than that was the thought that maybe, just maybe, Ethan had never truly understood me. Maybe he had never really cared. As the days passed, the pain of the betrayal settled deeper into my bones, and I began to see the full extent of what Ethan's actions had cost us. It wasn't just the inheritance, though that was certainly the most tangible loss. It was the erosion of trust, the tearing apart of a bond that had taken years to build. I couldn't look at him the same way anymore. Every time he spoke, every time he asked for something, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. How could he still ask for things from me when he had taken everything from me without a second thought? How could I keep giving when I knew he didn't truly appreciate what it all meant? The anger I had felt initially was slowly turning into something else, something colder, something more sorrowful. It was a deep sadness, a grief that I hadn't expected to feel. But I did. I felt it in every part of my being, a constant ache that never seemed to fade. I began to see Ethan in a new light, one I wasn't sure I wanted to see. I remembered when he was a child, full of promise and wonder. He had been bright, eager to learn, always asking questions, always wanting to help. He had such potential, such a bright future ahead of him. And now that future seemed wasted on a selfish, reckless pursuit of pleasure. I saw it in the way he spent his money, on expensive clothes, lavish nights out, trips that didn't mean anything except the temporary satisfaction of his desires. I saw it in the way he treated his friends, as if nothing mattered except how they could help him indulge his whims. And it hurt. It hurt to watch the boy I had once been so proud of, the boy I had worked so hard for, turn into someone I barely recognized. I tried to reach out to him, tried to talk to him about what had happened, but every conversation felt hollow, every word meaningless. He didn't understand. He didn't get it. He didn't understand that it wasn't just about the land or the money. It was about respect, about honoring what had been given to him. I had spent my life working for him, trying to give him a future that didn't have to struggle the way I did, but he had tossed it all aside, as if it were nothing. And when I tried to explain that to him, all I got was excuses. "It's my life, Dad. I'll do what I want." The arrogance, the disregard for everything I had done for him, made the pain even worse. He didn't care. He didn't care about the sacrifices I had made. He didn't care about the life I had given him, and that, more than anything, broke me. The distance between us grew with each passing day. I found myself withdrawing, retreating into myself, unable to face him. The man I had raised, the boy I had once loved so deeply, was slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't undo what had been done. The more I tried, the more he pulled away. It felt like I was losing him, not just to the world outside, but to his own selfish desires. The ache in my chest only deepened as I realized that maybe, just maybe, I had already lost him. I had spent my life trying to build something for him, trying to give him a future, but in the end it felt like he had thrown it all away without a second thought, and that was a pain I didn't know how to bear. As the days passed, the ache in my chest grew heavier, and I began to understand the true weight of what had happened. It wasn't just the land, the inheritance, or the money that hurt. It was everything behind it. The sacrifices, the years of hard work, the hopes and dreams I had invested in Ethan. Every day I worked tirelessly to give him a better life, to ensure he never had to face the same struggles I had. And now, it all felt pointless. The foundation I had built, the future I had carefully constructed, had been torn down in one impulsive decision, as if it meant nothing. It wasn't just about what he had done. It was about the way he had disregarded everything I had given him. It was the realization that I had spent my life building something for him, and he had thrown it all away without even a second thought. I couldn't bring myself to look at him the same way anymore. When Ethan spoke, when he asked for things, I couldn't help but feel a pang of bitterness. How could I continue to give when I knew he didn't understand the value of anything I had done for him? How could I keep offering him the world when he had so carelessly destroyed everything I had worked for? Each time he casually asked for something, whether it was money for a new trip or for some extravagant gift, I felt a growing resentment. It wasn't just that he had sold my inheritance, it was that he continued to ask, without ever understanding the gravity of what he had done. I had given him everything, every ounce of effort, every moment of my life, and he had shown no respect for it. The conversations we had after I discovered the truth were strained, filled with discomfort and unspoken tension. I tried to explain to him why it mattered, why what he had done was more than just a financial loss. But every time I opened my mouth, the words felt hollow, like they were falling on deaf ears. Ethan didn't get it. He didn't understand the years of sweat and sacrifice behind the life he had been given. To him, it was just another transaction, another fleeting pleasure to be bought and sold. "It's my life, Dad. I don't need your approval," he would say with a shrug. And, with every word, it felt like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. He didn't care. He didn't care about what I had done for him, about the future I had worked so hard to create. All he cared about was satisfying his own desires. And it broke me. The man I had raised, the boy who once looked up to me, was slipping away. Every time I looked at him, I saw less of the child I had once known and more of a stranger. Ethan had changed in ways I never expected. The impulsive decisions, the reckless spending, the disregard for anything beyond the present moment. It was all so foreign to me, I couldn't recognize the young man standing before me. He had become consumed by his own desires, by the shallow promises of material wealth and empty pleasures. It wasn't just that he wanted to live a different life than I had planned for him. It was that he had lost all sense of responsibility, of respect for the things that truly mattered. I began to wonder if he had ever understood what I had tried to teach him, or if he had simply ignored it all, thinking that I would always be there to clean up his mess. The more I tried to reach him, the more he pulled away. I wanted to understand why he had done this. I wanted to know what had led him to make such a decision, but every conversation seemed to end in frustration. He didn't see it. He didn't see the hurt he had caused, the years of effort that had gone into providing for him, building a future for him. I kept thinking back to when he was a child, the boy who would sit with me and talk about his dreams, the boy who would look up at me with such admiration. How had he become this person? How had the son I had worked so hard to raise turned into someone so selfish, so indifferent to the sacrifices I had made? I wanted to scream at him, to tell him everything I had held inside. I wanted to tell him how much it hurt, how deeply it cut to know that he had chosen this path, this careless, selfish path, without any consideration for the consequences. But the anger wasn't enough. It wasn't just about being angry anymore. It was about the grief that had settled in my heart. I grieved for the relationship we had lost, for the connection that had once been so strong, but now seemed so fragile. I grieved for the person I had hoped Ethan would become, and the person he had turned out to be. I grieved for the dreams I had for him, the future I had built for us that now felt so uncertain. And yet in the quiet moments when I wasn't consumed by anger, I still loved him. He was my son. No matter how disappointed I was, no matter how deeply hurt, he was still my child. I thought about all the times we had spent together, the memories of his childhood, and I remembered the hope I once had for him. I remembered the pride I felt when I saw him take his first steps, when I watched him play sports, when I saw him grow into a young man with so much potential. But now it seemed that all of that was slipping away, fading into a distant memory. I wanted to hold on to that hope, to believe that there was still a chance for him to change, to learn, to grow. But with every passing day, that hope felt more and more distant. I felt like I was losing him, not just to the world around him, but to his own choices, his own disregard for the things that truly mattered. Every time he smiled, every time he asked for more, I felt a pang of sadness. It wasn't just the material loss. It was the loss of the bond we had once shared, the bond that now seemed irreparably broken. The more I tried to fix it, the further away he seemed to drift, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had already lost him for good. How could I fix this? How could I get through to him when he didn't even seem to care? The thought of it was suffocating, and I found myself withdrawing more and more, retreating into a shell that only seemed to deepen the divide between us. I had given him everything, and yet it felt like it was never enough. I was devastated. Yes, the pain of Ethan's betrayal weighed on me like a constant burden, each breath feeling heavier than the last. But despite everything, something in me refused to be broken. I was hurt beyond words, but there was a fire inside me that began to ignite, a quiet determination that I hadn't felt in years. The shock of it all, the sheer audacity of Ethan's actions, had shaken me to my core. I had given everything to him, poured my life into building a future that he could rely on, and in return he had tossed it all aside. It would have been so easy to wallow in self-pity, to let the grief of the situation consume me completely. But I couldn't. I had spent too many years working to build something, to leave behind a legacy for him, to just let it slip away without doing something about it. I had always been a man who believed in action. My entire life I had worked tirelessly, never asking for help, never waiting for someone to fix things for me. I built everything I had from the ground up. Every connection I made, every lesson I learned, had been a step toward securing a better life for my family. I had spent years studying the ins and outs of business, learning everything I could about the world of finance and investments, not just for me, but for Ethan, so that one day he would have the tools to manage everything I had worked so hard for. But now it felt like he had thrown it all away without a second thought, without understanding the blood, sweat, and tears that went into making it all possible. I couldn't let that happen. Not without a fight. I started to pull back into myself, into the quiet corners of my mind where I had stored all the knowledge I had accumulated over the years. My mind began to race, thoughts whirling with possibilities, strategies, and options. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear to me. Ethan thought he could take everything I had built without consequences, without even telling me. But he had underestimated me. I wasn't just going to sit back and let him destroy everything. I had spent too many years working in the shadows, building connections, learning the rules of the game. Now it was time to play it. Now it was time to take control of what was rightfully mine. I spent hours every day at my desk, going through old documents, reviewing contracts, and making calls I hadn't made in years. I was methodical, focused, a man on a mission. The calm was deceptive. To anyone else, it might have seemed like I was merely processing everything, trying to move forward. But internally, I was already planning my next steps, making connections with people I hadn't spoken to in ages, reigniting old partnerships, and gathering the knowledge I would need to turn the tide. Ethan had thought he could take what was mine and walk away without a second thought, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. I had built my life from nothing, and I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers without a fight. The phone calls started to become more frequent, the meetings more intense. I wasn't reaching out to people out of anger. I was reaching out to them with purpose. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, determined. I was doing what I had always done, using my skills, my connections, and my knowledge to get what I wanted. But this time I wasn't just building something for my future. I was fighting to reclaim what was mine. Ethan thought I was powerless. He thought that just because I was older, just because I had been quieter in the past few years, that I had become weak. He couldn't have been more wrong. I carefully reviewed everything that had been done, the sale of the inheritance, the terms of the deal, everything that had led to this point. The more I looked into it, the more I realized just how much leverage I had. He had thought he could sell what was mine and never face the consequences, but there were holes in his actions, things he hadn't accounted for, things he didn't know about the law, the business world, the people I had worked with over the years. I wasn't just some naive man who had no idea what was going on. I had the knowledge, the experience, and the connections to fix this. I began making calls to people I knew I could trust, people who owed me favors or had been in similar situations before. I didn't let Ethan know what I was doing. I didn't need to give him any warning. All he needed to know was that I wasn't going to let this stand. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. As I made my moves, I started to see the pieces come together. Slowly but surely, the storm I had been preparing was building up, quietly unnoticed by anyone. Ethan thought it was over. He thought he had gotten away with it. But I wasn't going to let him win. The more I worked, the more I realized something important. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about respect. It was about showing Ethan that actions have consequences. I didn't want him to just feel the sting of losing the inheritance. I wanted him to understand that the things he thought he could take for granted, the trust, the sacrifices, the years of work I had put in, were not his to dispose of. I was going to take control, and I was going to show him that family means something, trust means something, respect means something. Days turned into weeks as I continued my work in the background. I knew I couldn't rush this. I had to be patient, methodical. Every move had to be calculated, every step had to be perfect. I wasn't going to let my emotions dictate my actions. This was a battle of wits, and I was ready to win it. I was building something, not just to reclaim what was mine, but to teach Ethan a lesson he would never forget. I wasn't just going to let him continue down this path of selfishness and carelessness. It was time to put an end to it. As the days went by, the pieces fell into place. The phone calls became more promising, the deals more certain. It was only a matter of time before I had everything in motion. The storm I had been quietly building was about to break, and when it did, Ethan would finally understand that there was a cost to his actions. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about taking control, standing up for what was mine, and showing him that no one could just take what they wanted without facing the consequences. I wasn't going to let him get away with this, not this time. Months passed, each day feeling like an eternity as I worked in silence, building my case, making connections, and carefully plotting every move. Time, however, had its way of altering perspectives. The devastation I had felt in those first days of betrayal had transformed into a quiet resolve. I wasn't just going to get back what was mine. I was going to make Ethan understand the gravity of what he had done. I wanted him to feel the weight of his actions, not just as a loss of material wealth, but as a loss of family, respect, and trust. He had chosen a path of selfishness, and now it was time for him to realize that every action comes with consequences. The day finally arrived, and I knew that I had everything in place. The legal maneuvers were ready, the pieces had all been moved into position, and the time to act had come. The calm I had felt throughout the months of preparation now gave way to a quiet storm inside me. I wasn't nervous. I was resolute. This was the moment I had been working for, and nothing was going to stop me from seeing it through. The plan had taken months, but every step had been deliberate. Ethan had no idea what was coming, and for once that filled me with a sense of clarity. I knew this was the only way to reach him. I walked into the room where Ethan was sitting, his usual, carefree demeanor all too apparent. He was sprawled out on the couch, casually flipping through his phone as if everything in his life was just one big distraction. His carefree attitude felt almost mocking, as though he hadn't a care in the world. Nothing to lose, nothing to worry about. But that would soon change. I stood there silently for a moment watching him. I had to make sure that I was prepared for this moment, that I would have the strength to confront him. It felt like everything had led to this. "Ethan," I said, my voice calm but carrying a weight he wasn't used to hearing. He looked up from his phone, startled by the tone. For a split second, his face betrayed a flicker of recognition, as if he sensed something was different. He put the phone down, sitting up straight. I could see the subtle shift in his posture, his body language tightening. He knew something was coming, but he didn't know exactly what. "We need to talk." Ethan let out a sigh, a nervous chuckle, escaping him. "Dad, I told you I don't want to hear about it. I'm doing fine, okay?" he said, trying to brush it off with a wave of his hand. But I wasn't going to let him hide behind his usual excuses. This was bigger than his deflections. "You think you're fine?" I replied, my voice a little sharper now. "You think everything's fine after what you did?" The air between us grew heavy. He could feel the change in the tone, the shift in the atmosphere. This wasn't a conversation I was going to let him ignore or dismiss. He had crossed a line, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. I walked over to the desk and grabbed the documents I had been holding on to for weeks. I placed them in front of him. "You sold my inheritance, Ethan," I said quietly, letting the words sink in. "Everything I worked for, everything I sacrificed, gone. And for what? To fund your reckless lifestyle?" He froze, the color draining from his face as he realized what I had in front of me. The very thing he thought he had gotten away with, the thing he had taken from me, was now staring him in the face. His usual bravado vanished in an instant, replaced by a look of confusion, then guilt, and finally fear. What are you talking about?" Ethan stammered, his voice shaky now. His hands began to tremble as he reached for the papers, but I stopped him. I wasn't letting him deny this, not anymore. I needed him to face it. "You thought you could sell what was mine," I continued, without ever considering the consequences. "But you didn't just sell property, Ethan. You sold the future I built for you. You sold the trust we had. You sold our family." My voice cracked slightly on the last word, but I quickly steadied myself. I had to remain calm, even if this was tearing me apart inside. His face shifted from confusion to guilt, and finally I saw something I hadn't expected. Regret. Real, deep regret. It was fleeting, but it was there. And for the first time I saw a glimpse of the son I had once known. He had done something unforgivable, but at least he was beginning to understand the depth of it. I didn't mean to hurt you, Dad," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I just wanted to have a good life. I thought I could handle it." "You thought you could handle it?" I repeated, my voice softening, despite the anger still boiling beneath. "You didn't handle it, you destroyed it, everything I worked for, everything we built together, and you just tossed it aside for what? A fleeting thrill? A luxury you didn't earn?" His eyes welled up with tears now, but he still couldn't fully bring himself to look at me. "I'm sorry, Dad, I didn't realize that, I didn't think—" His words trailed off, and for a moment I wondered if he was even capable of understanding the weight of what he had done. I stood there, watching him, letting the silence stretch between us. There was no easy way to fix this, no simple apology that would make everything okay. The damage had been done, and we both knew it. But I had made my decision. This wasn't about the inheritance anymore. It was about the lesson he needed to learn. I had to teach him that actions had consequences. It wasn't just about taking back what was mine. It was about showing him that there were boundaries, that no one could just take and take without understanding the responsibility behind it. The silence hung heavy in the room, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that follows a truth being spoken, a moment of clarity after a long period of confusion. Ethan was visibly shaken. His usual bravado had completely evaporated, and I could see the depth of his regret, the weight of his actions starting to settle on him. But I wasn't about to let him off the hook. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I took a deep breath and walked over to the filing cabinet where I had kept all the legal documents, contracts, and agreements. I pulled out the final piece of the puzzle, the one document that would finally close the chapter on the sale of the inheritance. "It's time to undo this, Ethan," I said, my voice firm. "I've already started the process. The sale is being reversed and the property is being returned to me. What you thought you could take from me, you will give back." Ethan's face paled as he listened to my words, the reality of what I was saying sinking in. He wasn't in control anymore. The deals I had made, the plans I had set in motion, were finally coming to fruition. I had played the game by the rules, using the very connections I had spent years building, and now everything he had thought he could take was being put back where it belonged. It wasn't just about the land or the money, It was about teaching him responsibility, teaching him that there were consequences for his actions, consequences that couldn't be avoided by running away or pretending they didn't exist. Dad, I don't know what to say. I messed up, okay? I was stupid. I'm so sorry. His voice cracked and he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt, confusion, and something else, fear. Sorry doesn't change anything, I said quietly, my tone softer now. But it's a start, and that's something. Maybe it's the beginning of you understanding what I've been trying to teach you all these years. There was a long pause, and then Ethan finally nodded, as if accepting the weight of his actions for the first time. The inheritance would be returned, the damage done would begin to heal, but there was something more important at play here. Ethan was beginning to understand the true cost of his choices. He wasn't the same person he had been when this all started, and though I couldn't undo the past, I could at least help him take the first step toward a better future. As I watched him, a part of me knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where lessons would be learned and trust would be rebuilt, slowly but surely. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing. Ethan would never forget this moment, and neither would I. When Ethan finally realized what I had done, he was speechless. The words had failed him, just as they had failed me when I first discovered what he had done. There was nothing left to say. All the excuses he had been hiding behind crumbled in the face of the truth. The weight of it all hit him like a freight train, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something different in his eyes. A flicker of understanding, a glimpse of remorse that wasn't just about regret over losing the property. It was deeper than that. It was a realization that in this battle he had lost something far more precious than land or money. He had lost the one thing I had spent my entire life trying to teach him, the value of responsibility, respect, and self-control. For years, Ethan had been chasing after luxury, things he thought would make him happy, things that would fill the emptiness he felt inside. He spent his days living for the moment, surrounded by the things money could buy, but never once pausing to understand the true cost of those things. He didn't realize that a life spent chasing after fleeting pleasures wasn't the life I had hoped for him. When I worked long hours, sacrificing my health, my time, my energy, I didn't do it for the gold and the trinkets. I didn't do it so he could live a life of indulgence. I did it to give him something much more important, a foundation, a future built on values that would help him stand tall in a world that could easily sweep him away. But now, as I stood there watching him, I understood something else too. I understood that no matter how much I gave, no matter how much I worked, no matter how many sacrifices I made, there were some things I couldn't hand over to him. Responsibility, respect, and self-control weren't things you could inherit. They had to be earned, learned, and cultivated from within. I had given him everything I could, every opportunity, every lesson, every ounce of hard-earned knowledge I had gained over the years. But I couldn't give him that. I couldn't give him the understanding of how to handle the things he was given, how to appreciate the gifts of family, hard work, and love. I had spent so many years thinking that if I worked hard enough, if I provided enough, if I sacrificed enough, that somehow I could build a future for Ethan that would protect him from the pitfalls I had faced. I thought that as long as I gave him everything I had, he would find his way. But the truth was, I had been so focused on giving him material security that I forgot about the one thing that truly mattered, the emotional and moral security that would guide him through life. I couldn't give him the ability to make wise decisions, to understand the deeper meaning of his actions. I couldn't force him to value the things I had worked so hard to build, and that realization was the hardest pill to swallow. It wasn't just the inheritance I had wanted to pass on, it was the lessons that came with it. The inheritance, the house, the land, those were just symbols of something far greater. They were meant to be a foundation, a launching pad for him to build his own life. But more than that, I had wanted to give him something intangible, something that would make him strong, something that would help him navigate the world on his own. I wanted him to understand that real wealth wasn't measured by the things you possessed, but by the character you developed and the relationships you built. Real wealth came from the choices you made when no one was watching, from the integrity you maintained when it would have been easier to take the shortcut. And when Ethan sold the inheritance, he was showing me that he hadn't learned any of that yet. As I stood there, watching him slowly piece together what had happened, I realized something else too. This moment wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. I had done everything I could to teach him, but now it was up to him. The path forward was no longer in my hands. It was his journey to make. I had given him the tools, the lessons, the foundation, the opportunities. I couldn't force him to change, just as I couldn't control his decisions. But I could show him the consequences of those decisions, and in doing so, I hoped he would finally understand the lesson I had tried to impart all these years. Ethan didn't immediately apologize, and in many ways I didn't expect him to. What he had done was too big, too damaging to be solved by a simple apology. But in the silence that followed our confrontation, I saw something in him I hadn't seen before, a sense of humility. He was beginning to grasp that there was a cost to his choices, and for the first time I thought maybe he was beginning to see that the things he had taken for granted, his family, his future, were not guaranteed. The world wasn't just a place to take from, it was a place to give, to build, to nurture. At that moment I knew I had to let go. I couldn't keep holding on to the vision of the perfect son I had once dreamed of. He wasn't that person anymore. And maybe, just maybe, he never would be. But I had to let him find his way. The journey ahead was his to make, and all I could do was hope that the lessons I had tried to teach him would resonate, that he would find his footing and learn to appreciate the value of the things I had tried to pass on. The days after our confrontation were filled with a quiet tension, but also, surprisingly, a sense of peace. I had done everything I could. I had stood my ground, reclaimed what was rightfully mine, and shown Ethan the cost of his actions. The ball was now in his court. And while I couldn't be sure of what the future held, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of our relationship, just the beginning of a new understanding. Maybe one day he would see the bigger picture, and maybe one day he would understand that what I had tried to give him wasn't about material wealth or inheritance. It was about teaching him to stand on his own, to make choices with integrity, to respect what he had, and to always remember that family, responsibility, and self-control were the true inheritance I had hoped to pass on. Have you ever felt betrayed by someone you loved? Maybe it was a friend, a family member, or someone you trusted deeply, only to find out that your sacrifices meant nothing to them. How did it feel? Did you feel lost, heartbroken, or even angry? Betrayal cuts deeper than most things because it comes from those we never expected from. In moments like these, the hardest question is, what do you do next? Do you fight for what's yours, or do you walk away, knowing you can never get back? What's been lost? If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have confronted them like I did, or would you have chosen a different path to find closure? I know it's not easy to deal with such pain, but sometimes standing up for yourself is the only way to regain control. It's about more than just reclaiming what's been taken. It's about teaching a lesson that resonates for a lifetime, both for you and for the person who hurt you. I want to hear your stories. Have you faced betrayal? And how did you overcome it? Share your thoughts below and tell me what you would do in my position. Your experience might inspire someone else who's going through something similar right now. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming challenges and finding strength, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring content. Let's keep the conversation going, because sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the greatest growth.